Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Aimee Schreiber.
And I'm Hilary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries.
Hello, fellow Intentionists. Today we are happy to be back with you. We have a very exciting episode planned. We are talking about the transitional Virgo archetype. This is our Virgo episode, and we're also going to be talking about the Princess of Discs tarot card. And what this archetype and what this card is about is we're going to dive into discussion about accessing inner reserves of strength and the bright side of inferiority and how that manifests. And we're going to share some practices for generating stability and rootedness in both life and creativity. And then we're going to get into some really interesting stuff, unraveling the kind of domination, submission, sadomasochism tendencies that exist in our society. And
within ourselves too.
Yes.
Play out within ourselves that we're kind of in denial about. So it's going to be
exciting.
Fun. This one's a little bit meaty, maybe a little more meatier. It's not all love and light today. We're wading into the darkness for a minute.
Yes, we have to explore it all.
Yes. Okay, so we actually have a newsletter in case this is your first time joining us. And if it is not your first time joining us, as a friendly reminder, to go to our website, Intentionists with an S, Intentionists.com. I'm like, did I spell that right? And sign up for our newsletter. We send it once a month and it's not spammy. So it's a great way for us to connect with you and for you to connect with us. So
yes,
take a look at that. And if you aren't already following us on Instagram, we are fairly active on Instagram, wouldn't you say?
We've been a little bit scattered this summer as far as various vacations and whatnot, but yes. We will be.
Yes.
We will be more active.
We will be more. And we actually have some really great conversations in our DMs. I will say that. I feel like we get some really amazing people commenting with really interesting insights. So if you want to connect with us there, we would love to hear from you.
Yes. Thank you, Hilary. So I'm just going to dive right in, starting with our tarot card, which I'm still going to say tarot. I talked about last week how I don't know if it's tarot or tarot, but I'm just used to tarot.
Yes.
So that's what's going to happen today.
And just so that people know, if you're joining us, this isn't so much, we're deconstructing the tarot card, which we are, but we're we're using this as a creative tool to guide our conversations each month. And what we have come to find, wouldn't you say this, Aimee, is that it's been shocking how in line the card and the astrological sign have been in terms of what is manifesting collectively. So
yeah,
we've really enjoyed that.
Right in sync.
Yes.
Yeah. And for just a reminder, we did this reading at the beginning of the year. So the card we picked for this month is the Princess of Discs, which this is from the Crowley Thoth Tarot deck, which I don't have. I'm not as familiar with this one, but it's a beautiful card. It has this young woman carrying a disc. And in this deck, the discs are like the pentacles, which, as a reminder, we've talked about this before, but pentacles are about the earth element, which is also Virgo is an earth sign. Discs, they can function as both coins and seeds. So anything in this suit are going to be things to invest or things to grow. This is all about growth. So this particular card, it's kind of the virgin archetype. It's the young woman on the threshold of something, whether it's womanhood, motherhood, or some sort of transitional change, where all the potential is there, and what ultimately manifests kind of depends on how it is watered and environmental conditions and other things like that. So this is a very kind of on the cusp of fall card, which we are. It also has to do with home and domestic matters, responsibility, kind of like behind the scenes details. Like we talked about, Leo is very flashy. It's very out in the limelight. This is the behind the scenes card. It is creating and it is vital, but it is not as apparent. Mm-hmm. It's not like a flashy flower. This is the soil that creates the flower. This is the roots that are supporting the tree. And the reality is that the roots and the soil, it's dark and dirty sometimes, but it is vital, and it's what makes like the shininess, the silky flower is possible because of it.
I love that. That is beautiful.
Yeah, I was reading a book. I've mentioned this book before, but it's called Ordinary Magic: Everyday Life as a Spiritual Path. And this woman, her chapter that she wrote, her name's Carla Needleman. She was talking about craftsmanship and art, and we both love to talk about the creative process. But she makes pottery, and she was talking about the inner strength that she finds from failing repeatedly, and the whole self disillusionment that happens when you are creating things and you're trying to express something, you're trying to grow something, but it's not completely what you think it is. You're discovering these things about yourself. I really liked how she worded this whole thing. Let me just read what she said real quick. She said, "It wears me down, overcomes my resistance, brings me low, but unlike any other experiences of being diminished by life circumstances that I may have had, it does me no harm. I am, if anything, more intact than before, and I find a new strength in myself coming from an unsuspected place, a new and very different sincerity that makes it possible to go on." So this card is really, it's about these inner reserves of strength and power that are deep and that they are hidden, and they require like getting dirty to discover oftentimes, but they're there. Like this is kind of like the hidden strength card. So I've been thinking about, so like these images and these archetypes that we talk about. So what? I'm kind of in a so what type of mood today.
That's
so I
fun.
was thinking
I've been
about
thinking like that. I mean, on the one hand, I feel like I go a couple days where I'm just like, this is everything. And then I have days where I'm just like, this is, who cares? Yeah, just like you said.
right.
Okay, go ahead.
No, so I'm just thinking like what is helpful about looking into these things, and what practical thing can we do with this energy, which is amplified. Like this is an archetypal energy. It's amplified at certain times of the year, certain times of the menstrual cycle. So how can we access it? So I have my little list of like ways to kind of explore this type of energy. And a couple of them are like journal prompts and meditation practices. So the first, so since this is the earth element, and Virgo is about like rooting down, and it's kind of like domestic, I have found I often feel very rootless in life, and it usually is always because I don't spend enough time asking myself what I think and what I value. Right? So it's like
Really?
the whole,
Right.
yeah, we're busy, we're doing stuff, and like how much time do we really spend looking inside and like digging down and saying like, who am I? Like what do I value?
Well, and this is something that I think as a evolved and advanced society, a technologically advanced society that we live in, that we have, most of us have quite a few options, right? Like there are times where it may feel like we don't have a lot of options, but there's access to information everywhere, right? And the world is changing quickly. And so I think these are the questions we have to ask ourselves all the time, because I know same thing's been happening with me this week. I feel like I've been faced with kind of two diverging roads. Like, which master am I going to serve? Because I can't serve two masters. Like I either have to go down this path and go full bore, or I've got to go down a different path and spend time doing that. Right. You and I have had a lot of conversations about like, what are we doing here? Like, what are, what is it that we really want? So I love that you're saying that, because yes, I know we've had those conversations this week, and I wonder if it's partially, I think collectively it's up. I've noticed that among other friends that we've all been talking a lot about, just like, okay, what path are we like, let's get down to brass tacks. Like what is it that I really want right now? How do I want my life to look? And what do I feel obligated to do that is a lie, that is a fallacy, that I'm not really obligated to do? And all I have to do is set a boundary. And what is it? And how do I make those choices powerfully if I'm going to choose whatever I'm going to choose? So.
Right. 100%. Yeah. It really is just taking an inner inventory. So the journal prompt would be, what do I value? What do I want? Like, and I was doing this the other day, and I was really surprised to find like all the ways that I think that my life should look, that I'm like striving towards in various small ways. that really don't align with like what I actually value. So it's like you can't ever figure out what that is until you just ask yourself and do some writing or thinking about it. And if you're more of a visual person, or I guess inner visual, I should say, I have a meditation visualization that I like to do when I want to feel rooted and grounded to the earth and within myself. And all you do is you just stand, close your eyes, and imagine roots coming out of the bottom of your feet and connecting to the center of the earth, and kind of imagine the energy going up from the center of the earth up your body. And a variation on this, especially if you feel really up in your head, is you can imagine the roots coming from your head, where we kind of center ourselves sometimes, growing down through your heart and then down to like your root chakra, pelvic area, and out. Sit on the ground and visualize them going out the bottom of your spine from your head, so that you get the visual and the feeling of your head joining to your heart, joining to like your roots.
I think this is interesting too, because I remember early on in my exploration of energy and energy healing in a spiritual way, I was probably in my early 20s. So this is like almost 20 years ago. And that's crazy to say that. But I remember being like, so me visualizing this is going to make me feel more grounded. Like that sounds crazy to me. But I will say at this point in my life, I've learned now to harness the power of visualization, and that there really is something connecting it's that subtle energetic body, and that thought, intention, manifestation part that really, by using that visual, you're telling your body to zip up and line up. It's kind of like, I mean, I've been reading a lot about cleansing, because this is a time of year where a lot of people do a lot of cleanses. And this idea that there was a part of this cleanse where it's like, take a moment and visualize your body releasing everything that needs to come out of its cells. And it's like, there's a reason for that, because there's power when you put your brain into your body, right? You see this in childbirth. You see this in a yoga class or a meditation class, when you're in a part where it's painful, and it's like, kind of lean into that and explore that and release that. And then you can move into a new position. So
that just reminds me, this is kind of off topic, but one of the things that I love that I learned when I did a yoga retreat in Mexico, when you're in a really hard yoga pose, you just ask, who is experiencing this uncomfortable sensation? Like just the act of like shifting it back just that tiny bit, it just changes the perspective of the experience and gives you like additional insight into like what is going on and how you're approaching life.
Right. Because the practice is the way you approach everything in your life, right? I mean, that's how you do it. So I think about that sometimes when I'm in Orange Theory and I'm like running my guts out and I'm like so freaking competitive, and I'm like, dude, why? I mean, it's great. Like push it. But like whether I burn, 500 calories or 520 calories, like who cares? Like, what is this all about? Anyway, that was a random digression.
Yeah. No, speaking of like healthy habits though, take stock of your habits this time of year. What ones are helpful to your intentions? What are you growing right now? Like this is a growth card. So what are you growing? And is it helpful to you or is it not?
And do you need to pull the weeds? Are there things that you're doing that need to just be removed? Like, and sometimes the removal of that process is having a difficult conversation with someone, or just saying no to things that you maybe want to do, but you want to do other things more, right? This has been a lesson that I've had to learn. And then to release whatever associating guilt that you have with it, and trust that by making space that you'll be able to serve and create in a capacity that is more in line with who you are. Because sometimes, we expand and sometimes we have to contract, and cutting things back can often mean that we're making space so that we can expand in a way that is more calm and in line with what we really want.
Absolutely. Yes. It's very like the energy of just the fall. I mean, for those of you who haven't listened to our seasonal episodes, we have a spring, summer, fall, and winter series. I don't know what numbers they are, but we talked about really leaning into this fall transitional time. But yeah, that's absolutely a great thing to do. I have one more little creative exercise that I wanted to share. and it is to draw your own tarot card. So you
Or
can use
oracle
this
card.
one or oracle card, whatever. Like you can take this archetype. This is like a princess of discs. You can choose any character or archetype that you feel interested in and just physically putting something on paper. It doesn't have to be anything amazing. There's no pressure about this, but it's something that you can have that is a symbol of your creative exploration. And it's going to give you insights about yourself depending on how you do it. And then you can keep it with you, like in a notebook or whatever. But I'm a really big believer in art magic, which is just putting intentions into physical artworks, because the psychological power of seeing a symbol and an intention that you have created physically drawn out, I think that's not to be underestimated.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the reminder of it. And not to mention the time it takes to create the art. That entire time that you're creating whatever it is that you're creating, you are infusing it with your intention and creativity. And so that can be, it can be seen. And I can say even, I mean, my new temples are art museums, right? Like that's where I go. Those are like my holy places, right? I love going to those because, and you find that as you tune into those subtle energies of the work, you can just stand in front of something and they all have a different vibrational frequency and you can feel that. You can walk in and not even know anything about what the art is about and know that there's something, okay, this was used in for sacred purposes. This was someone's, because most of the art that's in these museums, especially if it's ancient art, it had something to do with, it's like either pottery and stuff that was like kind of thrown away in a garbage that was then discovered by archaeologists, or they're like ceremonial temple items, right?
Yeah. Making art is as good as a therapy session, I think. Yes. So
amen to that.
Learn a lot.
Shall we move to Virgo?
Tell us about Virgo.
Yes. Okay, I will. So Virgo, just really quickly, I'll run through the lineup of Virgo. So Virgo is an earth sign, as you mentioned before. It's mutable, it's yin, it's ruled by the 6th house, and it's ruled by the planet Mercury. Some of the key words that are used to describe Virgo are health. They are self-improvement, perfection, a little critical on the negative side, right? Sometimes there's a servant, slave, persecuted victimhood that is associated with Virgo, and inferiority and guilt. So those are some of the light and the dark, right? So Virgo is a transitional archetype. And we know because we just came from Leo, if you've listened to our Leo episode, that Leo is really about shining brightly. It's about grandiosity. It's about really claiming who you are. And after Virgo, we have Libra, which is all about, it's all about equality. And so we've got in the Aries to Leo, in the beginning of this series, if you guys haven't been sticking with us, I recommend going back through all of our Zodiac episodes, because what we talk about is starting with Aries is the trip around the Zodiac. And it's kind of the internal hero's journey or the collective hero's journey of how we move through the wheel every year. So Leo or Aries moves through Leo, and that is really the build up of the subjective self. And it culminates with Leo and its grandiosity. So it's starting out as like, here I am, just moving out into a
little newborn.
I'm a newborn. Yeah. I'm moving out into my journey. And now I'm like stepping into my, manifesting my abundance when you get to Leo, right? So, and there's a level when you are in grandiosity of superiority that comes with that sign.
Mm-hmm.
And Virgo represents inferiority. And while Libra represents equality. So the way that you get to the equality is through, it's by exploring those parts of ourselves that we're standing in our light and we're like, well, wait, maybe I don't know everything. It's the check yourself before you wreck yourself sign, right? It's like, okay, wait. So now you're all grand and amazing. Now, how do we get back to where do we find our equity and equality? And the way that we do that is by examining the parts of us where we are disillusioned. It's examining the parts of our society, of our systems that are disillusioned, right? If we're talking collectively, it's examining where we, where we fall short. And there's a lot of really good things about that, right? So it's not always just like, focusing on I know we've got this big self-care movement that's going around, which I agree with to a degree, but this is kind of the idea of like, you know what, it's okay to look into the cobwebs and take a moment and actually take a good look at yourself, right? So, and this is also the time of year where, like you said before, that the energy is shifting towards more practical matters, right? It's the rhythms and the routines of daily life. And Mercury, because that's the planet that rules this sign, it's left-brained, it's logical oriented, right? And it's really talks about how, how we find joy in the process and how we elevate the menial tasks that we do to a holier place. So we don't want to get so caught up in the final goal that we lose track of the now. Right. And I think you and I have talked about this in our own personal lives this week, just being like, okay, we have this vision and these things that are in front of us and these projects. And how do we get from here to there while honoring and enjoying the menial tasks that it takes every day, the step by step by step, the chop wood, carry water that it takes to really execute a plan and a shift and a change in consciousness of self and in consciousness collectively in your community. So to talk just really quickly on health, like you'd mentioned health, so that's also in Virgo. So it's a really good time of year for the internal cleansing. Just like Aimee mentioned, we have these living in alignment with the seasons episodes. And we're getting close to harvest season. So there's ripe melons everywhere and ripe peaches. And those are all just really cleansing fruits. So it's great to go like overdose on melons and, clean out your cells and really look at what's going on internally, drinking lots of water, flushing our systems. This is a really good time to just cleanse. So Virgo's about learning to be of service to the larger whole and not just to self, right? We talked about that just for a second. So the method of Virgo uses crisis and change to tear it down. So Virgo is really good in a crisis. It's aware that and it's also a little self-deprecating. Like it's aware that the ultimate goal exists, but it just hasn't been achieved yet. So it brings us back to reality. And it enforces introspection, and it creates a little bit of an awareness of lack, imperfection, and inadequacy, and shows us what we need to improve. So we've talked about these astrological polarity points and that each sign has its opposite. So that's the Virgo. The Virgo polarity is Pisces, which represents kind of our ultimate ideals. And we explore our lack by using the ultimate ideals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, by setting yourself up, comparing yourself to the ideal, that's the only way you can grow and even hope to achieve that, right?
Right. So I wanted to talk about the Adam and Eve myth because I thought this was a really interesting way, or a really interesting perspective in the Virgo archetype. And I'd never heard anything like this before. I got this from the Evolutionary Astrology Glossary. And they talk about, we know the Adam and Eve myth, right? That Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden, and God says, don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge. And you can just stay here and live in harmony and perfection forever. And Eve gets tempted by the serpent. She picks the apple or the fruit, and she takes a bite and says, Adam, now you have to do it because I've taken it and I'm going to have to leave. And so he does it, and he says, oh, she's the one that told me to do it, God. And then they're cast out of the garden. Right. So it's like, I've always hated the story. It's never made sense to me. And I've always hated it because I'm always like, oh yes, of course, the woman is to blame. This is like the perfect way of just setting up the patriarchy, right? Like blame her. It's her. Anyway, so the fundamental thing is that there's a split, like what's at the root of the Adam and Eve myth is there's a fundamental split between spirit and flesh. It's that spirit is good and flesh is bad, right? Adam was told to focus on God, and Eve wanted knowledge. She's tempted by the serpent, like we said, and now they're out in the garden. So there's this little formula that they talk about, that this is the root of this sadomasochism that is a bit of like an underlying distortion of the religious foundations in Western culture. So bear with me here. Open your mind way up. Blow this way up if this is like triggering or weird, and just hold it loosely, because I thought this was really fascinating the more I dug into it. So it said guilt plus atonement equals the psychology of masochism. So listen to this. Adam felt guilt for what he had done, and he was angry about it, but he blamed Eve. And so the guilt plus anger is the psychology of sadism. So this manifests in kind of subtle ways that our culture is, with like women getting paid less, or, just there's all different ways that we see this play out. I don't even need to give you examples because it's like, we all know, right? So the culture at a whole is kind of in denial about these underpinnings. I mean, if you look at Jesus's sacrifice of his own life, right? It's been set up as a cultural standard, yet itself is a masochistic act, right? Like he had to kill himself on behalf of the rest of us, just so we could all live, which never made sense to me. I mean, and I love Jesus. I think Jesus is a great teacher, and I love a lot of the stuff that Jesus taught, but the actual atonement itself I never understood why this guy had to go into the garden and bleed from every pore and then be hung on the cross because I was born.
It's because violence solves everything, don't you know, Hilary?
Yes. And there you have it, right? So there's this weird, so we notice that like they don't really, in the Garden of Eden, right? They don't really take responsibility for their actions. They kind of blame. And what this does is that there's this underlying victimization, and it plays out culturally in this domination submission relationship pattern that we've seen play out, right? So there's 3 possible thought patterns, and I'm quoting here from the Evolutionary Astrology glossary. And one is, and these are the things that we're working on shedding in this frequency. So when we're in the Virgo frequency, we're working on shedding these things. One is, I deserve pain, punishment, crisis, suffering, and I don't know why, but I just deserve it, right? I'm not good enough. That's what I hear when I hear that. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. I don't know why, but I don't, right?
Yeah.
2 is, for my needs to be met, I must somehow hurt first. It's got to be painful. It can't be easy. What do you mean? It can't be easy.
No pain, no gain. Yeah.
No pain, no gain, right? Yeah. How is that system working in anybody's life? Not for me very well. And then the other one is, I'm essentially worthless while intellectually knowing better. So I'm smart and I get it, but I'm worthless. Like, why do I deserve this? Right. So these are kind of the underlying things that are running in this frequency that, on the one hand, we need to look at how, where are we fooling ourselves in our grandiosity? But on the other hand, like, wait, is that true?
Yeah. You need to learn how to approach yourself with reality and with understanding like where your true shortcomings are, without being a martyr about it and without beating yourself up about it. Like, there is a healthy way to do this. And those 3 things you just listed, that's like a typical, like, that's running in all of our minds. That
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So Virgo, so as I said before, Virgo learns the nature of itself through crisis, and crisis forces analysis, which leads to reflection. Okay. So Virgo is about analyzing things. It's about taking an inventory. It's about looking at stuff and going, what is true and what isn't true? What is running me? What is a system that no longer works in my life? And Virgo compensates for inner emptiness. This is another thing that we have to watch for, by always being busy. Busybody.
Yeah.
So someone who, and the thought process goes along with this sadomasochistic thing, which is, somebody always needs my help and there's never time for me.
Right.
I've always got to help other people. I've always got to do that. So on the one hand, again, my biggest beef with the new age, like, self-love thing is, it's like super, it can tend to move into major selfishness. It's like a great privilegey, selfish, vortex that can happen. I'm not saying it always does, but when taken to its extreme, it's kind of like, people, think about some other people than yourself for a second. But I'm coming from the mindset that what we're doing is we're shedding puritanical belief systems. And in that context, self-care is really important, right? Because a lot of us have been raised in society and in communities and things where the message is, you have to be perfect and you're never enough. And in that case, then self-care is the remedy, right? We have to recognize and reinforce that, no, this is my birthright to be happy.
Right. Especially we look at Virgo and the Princess of Discs, like, these are manifestations of woman and how she has been defined in our culture.
Yes.
And so, yeah, these are all things that we need to look at. And what have we grown up with? What are we carrying? What ideas do we carry about femininity and just the fact of being a woman? Like, it usually, I mean, for me, especially people who have grown up in really religious places like us, that's all there. The female Christian martyr archetype is glorified, and it's what you are to aspire to.
You are to make the sacrifices. Yes. Right. And that is godliness. And there is some truth to that in certain contexts. So this is why it gets sticky, right?
You have to be able to look at it and
right.
figure out for your situation, for what you are trying to learn and unlearn, what way do you need to lean today?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is where we need the need for analysis, right? So the challenge for Virgo is the need to embrace that Piscean polarity by developing a regular spiritual practice that speaks to the person and learns to discriminate between what is reality and what is an illusion. Okay. And the one thing I wanted to end with on this Virgo note is this concept of the secret. We all know the secret, right? All you New Age lovers love the secret and know the secret. And it's kind of poking holes in this idea that the secret is just kind of the New Age version of Christian guilt. And I thought that was interesting to think of it like that. And what I mean by that is, the premise of the secret is like, well, so let's take it from like the negative point of view. Like if you're not getting wealthy, if you don't get the new job, if you don't, whatever it is that you want, it's because you don't believe enough. It's like, so in Christianity, it's like, well, at least I felt this way in Mormonism, where there was always this idea of needing to strive harder, that if things weren't going well in your life, it's because you weren't reading your scriptures and praying. And that if you would just do that, then things would be fine. Or if you were having an issue with the gospel, it was your problem.
Yeah. Like you don't have enough faith. You're not praying enough.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that heaven forbid that the doctrine is incorrect or that the doctrine is flawed. No, it's not. So the idea is just that with a secret, it's like, well, if we don't believe enough, if we don't pray hard enough, if we don't envision enough, then we aren't going to get it. Then the manifestation doesn't happen, right? So the way that they say it here in the evolutionary astrology glossary, and I'll quote here, think of what this does to the person whose karma or evolutionary necessity demand that they not have whatever it is that they're trying to manifest, right? That maybe there's some soul plans at bay. Like you were mentioning before we were recording, the idea of like, well, if you get cancer, it's your fault because you manifested it into your life, right? Like,
I said that like jokingly. Like,
well,
just
no,
of
course, yes, and thank you for clarifying that. But if you take the concept of manifestation to the nth degree, then you can get into some weird ideology. But maybe that if cancer's in the cards for you, if it's just what happens and we don't know why, right? Which happens to a lot of people, that more guilt, more anger, more feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, the underlying premise that we need to and can change our thoughts to change our reality is valid, but it too somehow got distorted by tying it to man-made beliefs about what life is supposed to look like or be like. And again, it's getting back to the natural God, the natural way of doing things, and the way things naturally are that will actually bring us to our own inner state of balance and grace. So sometimes we're going to get eaten by the lion, and sometimes we're going to be the one feasting on the fillet. The bottom line that Jeffrey Wolf Green always went back to is where the word of Jesus to seek God first, put God first, and what you need will be given to you. And that seeking needs to be sincere and consistent. So a simple concept of, and yet if we're honest with ourselves, it's much harder to pull off. But as Jeffrey Wolf Green said many times, the value's in the effort. So the idea that, you do have to have a level of devotion to whatever it is that you're trying to manifest, and that the faith is in the devotion. It's not necessarily in the ideology or in the belief system. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah.
What do you think about that?
I'm trying to like wrap my mind around that right now.
You're like, it's kind of gibberish. You're like, what you just said was a little bit like gibberish.
I think more than you said, like the power lies in the devotion type thing. And I think insofar as the devotion is like an act of practice, or like it's like action oriented. So like, I mean, the whole secret idea that like, if you're highly focused on this thing, it's going to come to pass. Which
and also that thoughts create your reality. Right. That at the, like, and on that part of it, I go, yeah, I agree with that. Right. That there's this element that like, if we have these limiting beliefs and they're informing everything about the reality that we're living in. And so we're just living out our self-fulfilling prophecies in every move that we make and everything that we do.
Right. Well, like that the thoughts create the reality, because when you're like obsessed with something in your mind, it affects your behavior, and you're going to behave in a way that is conducive to whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
But it is a trick. I see what you're saying. It is a tricky thing that can go into self-blame, victim blame like quickly, as far as like if you're going the reverse, like when bad things happen, not just like people who can make good things happen for them.
Right.
Because bad things just happen to everyone like during life.
Yeah. Name one. Yeah. I mean, everyone's experiencing suffering at one point or another, or some varying degree of it at all times. Right. I think, I mean, I like to try to focus on the joy, but I think I could pick out something uncomfortable or discouraging literally every day of my life if I wanted to focus on that, Sometimes things come in life and it knocks the wind out of you. And other times it's just kind of like, change your attitude, like buck up. But I mean, we're here, we're in human form, and part of being in form is just, it's challenging, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have to think about that more. That's an interesting concept that it is. I mean, it depending on the time of the month, like sometimes you're like, I like feel so empowered and I feel like I'm in total control of my destiny. And then other times you're like, my purpose right now is I have to surrender to what is. And those are very, very, very different approaches to behaving and to being in the world. And I think they're both valid depending on the time and depending on like what is called for. And that just goes back to like this theme that we come back to almost every single episode, is the cyclic understanding of being in the flow of what is naturally trying to occur.
Yes.
With your body, with like all these things that we become very detached from and disconnected from.
I think it's too, I've heard in different yoga circles talking about, harnessing subtleties. And I think there's so many things that we do in our daily lives to numb out, right? Just as a human, whether it be with things that we consume physically with like food or beverages, or things like social media or TV or whatever. And then there's an element that's really healthy to numb out, but you find that there's a lot of things that are missed when we're in the trance of numbing out all the time, right? So it's just interesting to see what can we do to kind of snap out of the trance and be like, what is it that we actually want? I wanted to just cover a few final things about Virgo, just to recap. Yeah. So some of the strength words for Virgo are analytical, observant, helpful, reliable, and precise. And so the way this applies, if you are a Virgo, then you'll be no stranger to this. If you're just like us, I don't think I have much Virgo in my chart, but we're obviously in Virgo season. So I am definitely feeling the vibes of like the analytical, detail oriented, like get things done, grounded energy that's going on right now collectively. I can feel myself leaning into that, and that is kind of taking over. And some of the weakness words are, like they're very skeptical. They can be a little fussy, a little inflexible, cold, interfering. So, people like to look to Virgos as friends because they're straight thinkers and they solve problems logically. They tend to be fairly truthful and loyal and determined. And they tend to be good in business. They're bright and they have a good memory and an analytical mind. So collectively, be open to allowing that energy to inform this next zodiac cycle, which is from the August 23rd to September 22nd, to just inform your experience and see how that plays out with what's going on in your moon cycle and with what else is going on in your chart.
Yes, all very fascinating. I just wanted to chime in with the quick rundown of the mythology of Virgo. Did you look at that at all?
No,
Hilary?
I would love for you to.
So I found that Virgo is the largest of the zodiac constellations. And it's associated with a Greek goddess named Dike, but I don't know how to say her name, but she was also sometimes known as Astrea, and she was the goddess of justice and purity. And she lived during this golden age of Greece where everyone lived in peace. And it was apparently just this kind of Garden of Eden type existence until humans became greedy and violent, where she left Earth to live in the stars. And she's going to return again for a second golden age, which I thought sounded a little familiar. So we got this Virgo second coming.
Yes.
And this constellation is also associated with Demeter and Persephone, which I think we talked about Persephone in an early episode. or maybe it was our fall episode. But that's a great story to look up. I feel like it's like the perfect psychological drama for diving into the underworld and the unconscious realms, like the subconscious realms. So that's an interesting one too. So that was really interesting, Hilary. So to recap, I know you already kind of recapped, but I thought one of the most interesting things that you said about Virgo was it's a way in the zodiac wheel to explore our shortcomings and inferiorities, and how that, like, that's how we grow, but like we have to get over our like delusions of grandeur,
right? From Leo, right?
That,
our grandiosity. So that we can move into balance, which is Libra. Libra is all about the scales, and we'll talk about that next month.
Nice.
Yes. Something I wanted to, unless you had more to that thought, I don't want to cut you off.
No, I don't think so. No,
I just wanted to bring up for our listeners that we will be dialing back our production of Intentionists for a short time, because I'm finishing this book and Aimee is working on opening an art studio and other things. And so we might be a little spotty, but we will not miss our monthly Zodiac episodes. So you can count on that. But the next couple of months, we ask you to just bear with us. We are still doing our newsletter. So please go to our website and subscribe. And so you can keep up with what's going on and what we have coming up. And we are putting together a list of some pretty great guests coming down the pipe. So stay with us.
And we are still behind the scenes working on a e-course for creativity too. So
yes,
lots of stuff in the pipeline, but yes, it will not be a totally regular schedule. So thank you for bringing that up, Hilary.
Yes. So thanks, guys. And we really appreciate all of you for joining us here today, and may you enjoy the rest of your month.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.